They said I was never real family, so when Grandma collapsed in the kitchen, they didn't call me, they didn't ask, they didn't even think about me. They just prayed the bill would disappear. But it didn't. It came to me, and I paid it. Without saying a word. My name is Ellie. I'm 32. I wasn't adopted, not officially. I was absorbed into the family like a stain no one wanted to admit was there. My mother died when I was 4. No father on the record. Her cousin, my aunt, took me in. They said it was generous. They reminded me often. When guests came over, they'd say, "Oh, that's just Ellie. She's not really ours." Like I was a lost dog who followed them home. Like I was temporary. Like I wouldn't notice. I noticed. I noticed every time they made 2 grocery lists, one with the good food, one with the extra. Every time the birthday cake had 1 name missing. Every time the school pickup came 30 minutes late. Every time I was told to let Haley and Matt go first because they're the real kids. Every time Grandma looked at me like she was trying to remember where I came from. They didn't hit me. They didn't scream. They didn't need to. Neglect is louder than fists when you grow up inside it. I learned early, silence is safer than asking, so I stopped asking. I kept my head down, did the dishes, did the laundry, helped Haley with her math, taught Matt how to ride a bike, got good grades, didn't date, didn't talk back, didn't expect anything. When I got a part-time job in high school, I didn't use the money for clothes or fun. I paid for groceries when they forgot their card. I paid the electric bill once, twice, then always. No one ever said thank you, not even once. It became normal. The quiet girl in the corner, paying for the light they left on. Not family, just functional. They called me mature. They meant obedient. When I turned 25, I moved to a studio across town. They didn't help me pack. They didn't visit. When the landlord called them as an emergency contact, they told him they weren't responsible for me. Not our daughter, they said. I only found out because the landlord apologized. Still, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every fake holiday, where pretending was easier than facing silence. I went back. Last year was the last time. It was Thanksgiving. I'd been working 3 jobs. Nursing assistant, part-time admin, and overnight stalker at a 24-hour grocery. I hadn't slept in 2 days. Didn't matter. I baked a pie anyway. Spent $38.79 on a bottle of wine that wouldn't make me gag. Bought Grandma's favorite flowers, yellow ones. I don't even like yellow. The bus ride took 2 hours. I held everything in my lap. My hands were raw from the cold. I stepped onto the porch, rang the bell. Haley opened the door. She looked me up and down, said nothing, then called over her shoulder. "She's here." She, not Ellie, not a name, just a shadow walking in from the past. I walked into the living room. The table was already full, plates full, glasses raised. No one had waited. No one looked up. There was no seat for me. I stood there, coat still on, holding pie and wine and wilted flowers. Matt looked over, frowned. "You're late," he said, then went back to eating. I wasn't late. Dinner had started early. They hadn't told me. I turned to the kitchen, found an empty stool by the fridge, ate my food standing up, didn't speak, didn't ask questions. The pie sat on the counter, untouched, like me. Then Haley came in, leaning against the counter like it was a throne. Her eyes scanned me like I was a charity case, showing up to the wrong address. "You know," she said, "it's kind of sad." I didn't answer. She continued anyway. "You keep showing up every year, like it matters, like we're your people, but you're not even blood. You're not really anything." I looked at her. No hate, no sadness, just still. She waited for a reaction. There wasn't one. I put down the fork, picked up my coat, left the pie, left the wine, left the flowers. Grandma never said a word. No one looked up. No one asked where I was going. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. And no one came after me. That was the last time I stood in their house. The last time I tried. The last time I gave them the power to forget me in front of my face. I didn't cry on the bus home. Didn't clutch the pie I left behind. Didn't replay her words in my head. Because the silence was louder than anything Haley said. When I walked into my apartment that night, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't eat. I just stood in the doorway, still wearing my coat, still holding nothing. Something broke inside me that didn't make a sound. The next morning, I started deleting. Haley, Matthew, Uncle, Aunt, Grandma. Gone from my phone. No backup, no hesitation. I sat at my tiny desk and opened a spreadsheet. I listed every expense I was still covering for them. Grandma's medicine subscription, Matt's shared phone line, the Netflix account Haley still used. Cancel, cancel, cancel. I didn't leave a note, didn't explain, let them wonder. That was the first time I chose myself. It felt like a whisper in a hurricane, but it was mine. I stopped showing up. Holidays came and went. I didn't send gifts, didn't return calls. The silence stretched, but I didn't fill it. Instead, I worked. I woke at 5 a.m., took a crowded bus to a nursing home across town, changed linens, bathed strangers, held shaking hands through final breaths, went home, studied online. Then to the night shift at the admin office, filed reports until 1 a.m., home again, sleep, repeat. I was always tired, but not empty. 3 months in, I started saving. Every paycheck, a little more. I opened a high-yield account. No one knew. I enrolled in a coding course, free one. Used YouTube tutorials for the rest. Failed. Started again. I didn't tell anyone, because there was no one to tell. 6 months later, I landed a remote contract job, $30 an hour. It felt like cheating. I kept the admin job for a while, then left quietly. No goodbye party, no fuss. The apartment changed little by little. First a real desk, then a better chair, then walls with color, bookshelves filled with things I picked. Not borrowed, not given out of pity. Mine. I got therapy. Online, pay as you go. The therapist said, "It sounds like you were emotionally neglected." I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen. She said, "That kind of trauma leaves roots, deep ones." I nodded. But I already knew. I wasn't healing to be better for them. I was healing to forget them. One day, the number I used to memorize called me. Aunt's phone. Still burned into my muscle memory. I didn't answer. I let it ring out, then blocked it. I kept going, stacked contracts, built a portfolio, started freelancing full-time. I wasn't rich, but I didn't flinch when rent was due, and that was enough. I saw a photo online once, Haley's wedding. A cousin tagged her. She wore white, looked smug. Uncle gave her away. The caption said, "Family forever." I didn't feel anything, not jealousy, not sadness, just distance. Like looking at a town you left behind. A year passed, then 2. I didn't mark the holidays, didn't bake, didn't decorate. I celebrated quietly, with sleep, with peace. I moved to a better apartment, one with light, one where the heater didn't groan at 2 a.m. I bought a new bed, new sheets, let myself rest in ways I'd never learned before. I got good at silence, not the kind they gave me, the kind I chose, the kind that healed. I stopped wondering if they'd change. I stopped wondering if I mattered to them. Because I didn't need to. I mattered to me. One night, I was reading when the call came. Blocked number. I almost ignored it. But something told me to answer. It was Haley. Her voice sounded smaller. "Ellie?" I didn't speak, just waited. "It's Grandma. She's in the hospital. She collapsed. They said it's serious. We didn't know who to call. Matt thought maybe you could. She trailed off. I didn't ask why they didn't call sooner. I already knew. They had spent years telling themselves I wasn't real family. And now, when it mattered, I was the only one they could think of. She asked if I could come. I said I'd think about it. Then hung up. I didn't rush, didn't pack a bag. I made tea, sat in my chair, looked out the window, watched the sky fade into silence. I stayed like that for a long time. And then I made a choice. I didn't pack right away, didn't book a ticket. I waited. 2 days passed, no follow-up call, no message, not even a voicemail. That's how I knew they weren't sorry, just scared. I opened my laptop, searched for the hospital, found Grandma's name on the patient board. ICU condition, stable but critical. There was a note. Family assistance requested. I stared at that word for a long time. Family, the word they used to lock me out. Now the word they used to pull me back in. I clicked the donate button, anonymous. I paid the medical bill in full, not because I forgave them, but because I refused to let them have power over her pain. They didn't deserve her, but she didn't deserve to suffer because of them. The hospital sent an automated thank you no one else did. I showed up at the hospital 2 days later, wore black, not for mourning, just because it felt like armor. I walked into the waiting room and they looked up like they'd seen a ghost. Haley stood, her expression cracked at the edges. Ellie. I didn't smile, didn't hug her, didn't even blink. Uncle was there, so was Aunt. Matt leaned against the vending machine, pretending to be on his phone. No one spoke. I walked past them, took the elevator alone, found Grandma's room. She was asleep, hooked up to machines, thinner than I remembered. I sat down in the corner, didn't touch her hand, didn't say her name, just sat. A nurse came in, checked her vitals, smiled at me. "You her granddaughter?" she asked. I paused. "Yes," I said. She smiled again and left. I stayed for an hour, watched the light on the monitor flicker like a tired star, listened to the beeping that marked each second like a countdown. When I stood to leave, Grandma stirred. Her eyes opened slow. "Ellie," she whispered, not a question, a fact. I nodded. She didn't say thank you. She just looked at me like she remembered who I was. Maybe for the first time. Downstairs, Haley was waiting, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You paid it, didn't you?" she said. I didn't answer. "We know it was you," she continued. "No one else would." I waited. She stepped closer, softer now. "Why'd you do it, after everything?" I looked at her like I was looking through glass. "Because I could," I said. She blinked. I walked past her. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't ask for thanks. Didn't ask if they were okay. They weren't my concern. Outside the air was cold, but it didn't bite. I got into the car. Not a rental. Mine, black, quiet, clean. I drove to a small hotel, paid in cash, checked in under a different name. Let them wonder where I'd gone. Later that night, Matt called. A number I didn't recognize. A burner, maybe. He left a voicemail. "Hey, we were just talking, and we were wondering, would you be willing to help with some other stuff too? Like, we're kinda stuck with the funeral planning. You're good at that kind of thing, responsible, you know?" There was no funeral yet. Grandma was still alive, but they were already planning it, already writing her off, already looking for someone to carry the weight, to pay the price. I didn't call back. Aunt texted the next day, short, cold. "We should talk." I didn't reply. Then came the final message. "Uncle," 3 sentences. "You're acting like you're better than us. You're not. Don't forget where you came from." I read it twice, then blocked the number. They didn't understand. I hadn't forgotten where I came from. I had outgrown it. I wasn't angry. I just wasn't theirs anymore. I stayed in town for one more day, didn't tell anyone, didn't offer to help, didn't ask how Grandma was. I already knew she would live, they would not change. The next morning, I went to a law office downtown. Small, quiet, discreet. I had an appointment, scheduled 3 weeks earlier. The receptionist offered me water. I said no, sat down, waited. The lawyer called me in. "Ellie Ward," he said. I nodded. He shook my hand. Didn't ask unnecessary questions. That's why I hired him. I opened the folder. Inside, my new will. Clean, sharp, simple. My assets, the apartment, the savings, the company shares, the patents, would go to a cousin named Jessie. She was the only one who ever asked me if I was okay. Once, when we were both 10, she offered me half her popsicle while I cried on the porch. She never asked for anything since, so I gave her everything. As for the rest of them, they weren't mentioned. Not a footnote, not a line. When the lawyer asked if I was sure, I nodded. He said most people leave something for family, even $1. "I have no family," I said. We filed it that day. When I left the office, the sun was too bright, the air too sharp, but I breathed it in anyway. I drove past my old neighborhood. The houses looked smaller. So did the people. I saw Matt on the porch, new baby in his lap, phone in his hand. His wife was yelling inside. He didn't see me. I didn't slow down. They say revenge is best served cold. I don't think I served it at all. I just stopped feeding them. Back home, weeks passed. I returned to my work, signed 2 new clients, published a paper under a pseudonym, turned down a podcast interview. I stayed invisible, but valuable. Then came the message from Grandma's lawyer. She had rewritten her will. They wanted me to review it. Said she insisted I be present at the reading. Said she called me her only constant. I didn't respond. A few days later, I got a copy of the draft. She left me the house, what was left of her savings. A few family heirlooms she said I once admired, a porcelain clock, a broken locket, a sewing machine that never worked. I read the document slowly. Then I asked for one change. Instead of accepting the inheritance, I donated it, all of it, to a foundation that gave housing to elder women with no family left. Women like the one I used to think she was. Not for Grandma, for someone else's grandma. Someone who wouldn't be surrounded by vultures. The lawyer asked again if I was sure. I was. The house went to someone who had been homeless. The clock and locket were auctioned for charity. The sewing machine, I had it fixed. Then I gave it to Jessie. She sewed me a scarf. Red, my favorite color, she remembered. The rest of them never called again, except once. Matt tried to add me on LinkedIn. I declined, then blocked him. He messaged me through a mutual contact, asking if I could help with a down payment. Said he was in a rough patch. I told the mutual to tell him, I've paid enough for people who thought I owed them. That was the last I heard. Haley, I saw her on a YouTube channel once, one of those fake lifestyle blogs, pretending to be a minimalist mom. Funny, she used to hoard everything, especially attention. She talked about toxic family and starting fresh. I didn't laugh, didn't cry. I just closed the tab and went back to work. Some nights I walk in my apartment barefoot, the floor warm, the air quiet. I sit on the windowsill, hold a mug of tea, think about who I used to be. I don't miss her, but I mourn her. She wanted so badly to be accepted, to be loved by people who couldn't see her. I don't want love like that anymore. I want peace, and I have it. They thought I was still the quiet girl. I let them believe that, as I walked past them for the last time. Thank you for staying until the end. If you've ever felt like the outsider, the forgotten one, the not real family, know this. You can disappear without dying, and reappear without asking permission. If this story stayed with you, share it, or just sit with it. Sometimes that's enough.